sold my soul to save her life, and she lied to me.
6 months ago, I had a thriving construction business that I'd built from nothing. A wife I'd been with since we were teenagers, 2 kids I'd give my life for, and a beautiful home I designed and built with my own hands. Today, I'm eating cold soup straight from a can in a $40 a night motel room, where the walls are so paper thin I can hear my neighbor crying himself to sleep every night. Sometimes I wonder if he can hear me doing the same thing. The kicker? Everything I lost was based on an elaborate lie that almost destroyed me completely, and the only reason I'm still standing is because my family refused to give up on me when I'd completely given up on myself. My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 45 years old, and what happened to me sounds like something you'd see on a true crime documentary. But it's real. Every single bit of it. And I need to tell this story because apparently what happened to me is more common than anyone wants to admit. It all started 2 weeks ago with a knock on my motel door at exactly 2 a.m. The Starlight Motel isn't the kind of place where good news arrives at that hour. I figured it was someone looking for the previous tenant, maybe a pill dealer or possibly the manager, Mrs. Chen, telling me my payment had bounced again. Instead, there was this man in a suit that probably cost $5,000 standing in my doorway. He knew my name, which immediately put me on edge at that hour. "Daniel Foster?" he asked in this calm, professional voice. "Yeah, that's me," I told him. "If you're here about money, I literally have nothing left to take. My bank account has maybe $12 in it." He introduced himself as William Hayes, private investigator, and said my ex-wife Rebecca had absolutely no idea he was there. Then he dropped the bomb that completely shattered my reality. He said what he was about to tell me would rewrite everything I thought I knew about her cancer diagnosis, our divorce, and why she really abandoned me and took everything I had. I need to back up and explain how I ended up in that motel room in the first place, because none of this will make sense otherwise. 18 months ago, my life was actually pretty great. I ran Foster Construction in Denver, a company I'd built from literally nothing but a beat-up pickup truck and a toolbox my grandfather left me when he died. We specialized in custom residential homes, the kind where every detail mattered and clients were willing to pay for quality. I had a crew of 8 solid guys who'd been with me for years. My foreman, Rick, had worked for me for almost a decade. These weren't just employees, they were family. I'd built our house myself about 12 years earlier. Every board, every nail, every detail was exactly how I wanted it. I remember being so proud showing it to my father, Jack, who'd run the same construction business before me. He walked through inspecting everything with his practiced eye and told me my grandfather would have been proud. That meant everything to me. Rebecca and I had been together since high school, 22 years of marriage. We had 2 kids, Tyler, who's 14, and Sophia, who's 12. Tyler was built like I was at that age, all awkward angles, waiting to fill out, playing football, and studying his playbook at breakfast. Sophia had her grandmother's musical talent, first chair violin in the high school orchestra despite being the youngest member. Our life had a rhythm to it. Breakfast together every morning, with everyone talking over each other. Rebecca packing lunches while reminding us about appointments and practices. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were sacred, with my mother Linda cooking enough food for 20 people, and my brother Kevin showing up with his wife and 3 kids. Kevin worked as a mechanic, always had grease under his fingernails, but he could fix anything with an engine. We'd sit on my parents' back porch after dinner, watching the kids play while Dad told stories about the old days when everything was done with hand tools and determination. Those Sunday dinners were the foundation of our family. Everyone together, everyone safe, everyone happy. Then Rebecca came home from a doctor's appointment crying so hard she could barely form words. She told me they'd found something during her annual exam, something bad. 2 days later, we were sitting in an oncologist's office at Denver General while Dr. Michael Wong explained that she had stage 3 ovarian cancer and needed to start aggressive treatment immediately. I remember every detail of that moment. The fluorescent lights humming overhead, the anatomical posters covering the walls, the way Rebecca's hand was shaking so badly in mine. Dr. Wong was completely matter-of-fact about it, explaining treatment protocols and survival statistics like he was reading stock prices. The prognosis was serious but treatable if we acted fast. The numbers were absolutely staggering. After insurance covered their portion, we'd be personally responsible for over $300,000 in treatment costs. Rebecca completely fell apart in the parking garage afterward. She pressed her face against my chest and sobbed about not wanting to die. She said she wanted to see Tyler graduate high school and college. wanted to watch Sophia's wedding someday, wanted to meet her grandchildren. She was absolutely terrified. I held her face in my calloused hands and looked directly into those green eyes I'd fallen for when we were both 17 years old. I made her a promise. I told her I would do absolutely whatever it took, sell whatever I needed to sell, work 3 jobs if that's what was required. She wasn't going to die on my watch. We were going to beat this thing together as a team, the way we'd handled everything else in our marriage. That night, we spread all the insurance paperwork across our kitchen table and tried to make sense of the coverage limits, deductibles, and exclusions. The math was absolutely brutal. Insurance would cover maybe $60,000 total. The remaining $240,000 or more was entirely on us to figure out. Rebecca looked completely defeated, like she'd already given up. But I grabbed both her hands and told her firmly that we'd figure this out. I reminded her our house had significant equity. My construction business was doing well with several projects lined up, and we had options. She squeezed my hand tight and told me she loved me. I said I loved her too, and we'd get through this as a team the way we'd gotten through everything else. Looking back now with what I know, I can see all the red flags I completely missed at the time. The way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes when she said she loved me. How quickly she pulled out her phone to make a call right after we finished talking, claiming it was her sister in Portland, even though it was past midnight there, and her sister would have been asleep. The calculated look that flashed across her face when we discussed selling assets. But in that moment, all I could see was my wife, completely terrified and vulnerable, needing me to be strong and handle this crisis. So that's exactly what I was. The medical bills started arriving in waves like a tsunami. First was $47,000 for the initial diagnostics, scans, and consultations. I emptied our entire savings account, about $32,000, and paid the rest by maxing out 2 credit cards. Then came Dr. Wong's recommendation for an experimental treatment protocol. He explained in his pristine office with diplomas covering every wall that there was a newer pill combination showing remarkable results in clinical trials. It wasn't FDA approved yet, which meant insurance companies wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But he'd personally seen tumor shrinkage rates of 70% or better in his patients. "How much does something like that cost?" Rebecca asked, gripping my hand so tight her knuckles had gone completely white. "The full protocol runs approximately $180,000, Dr. Wong said without any emotion whatsoever, like he was telling us the weather. Rebecca immediately started to object, saying it was too much, but I cut her off. I told her we'd find the money somehow, that her life was worth more than any amount of dollars. I looked directly at Dr. Wong and asked when we could start the treatment. I sold my construction equipment first, the big ticket items. The excavator I'd saved for 3 solid years to buy. The 2 dump trucks, the crane, all the specialized tools that had allowed me to take on the bigger, more profitable commercial projects. I posted everything online on a Sunday night and had serious buyers lined up by Tuesday afternoon. It absolutely eliminated me inside because that equipment was what separated me from every other small contractor in Denver. Without it, I'd be limited to basic residential work and smaller projects. But Rebecca was dying, or so I genuinely believed at the time, and equipment could eventually be replaced. My wife couldn't be. I had to call all my active clients and explain the delays this would cause. Mrs. Henderson, who'd hired me to build her dream house, was incredibly understanding about the whole situation. She told me to take whatever time I needed, and that family always comes first. But the commercial developers I'd been working with on a major project weren't nearly so kind or understanding. They immediately pulled their entire contract and demanded their $50,000 deposit back within 48 hours. Just like that, months and months of projected income and profit vanished into thin air. Next, I had to let my entire crew go, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'd employed 8 guys, some of them for almost a decade. These weren't just employees or workers, they were genuine friends. They'd been to my kids' birthday parties, my parents' anniversary celebration, my family barbecues. I called them all into our office trailer on a Friday afternoon and told them I had to shut down operations indefinitely. I'll never forget the looks on their faces, the shock and worry. My foreman Rick spoke up first, this big guy who'd been with me the longest. He said they could all take significant pay cuts, work for reduced wages, until things stabilized and I got back on my feet. I told him as gently as I could that it wouldn't be anywhere near enough, and that I needed them to file for unemployment immediately and find other work to support their families. I promised them all that when this nightmare was over, if they'd still have me back, I would personally hire every single one of them again. They filed out quietly, looking devastated. Rick stayed behind after everyone left and told me something felt seriously wrong about this whole situation, that the numbers and timing didn't add up right. I told him cancer doesn't care about what adds up or makes sense. In month 3 of this nightmare, I put our house on the market. The house I'd literally built with my own hands over the course of a year, where every single nail and board held a specific memory. Tyler found me just standing in the workshop I'd added when he was born, staring at all my tools and equipment. He asked if we were really moving, his voice small and scared. I told him it was only temporary, that when his mom got better, we'd build an even nicer house together, maybe even bigger. He looked at me with these heartbroken eyes and said he didn't want a nicer or bigger house. He wanted this one, our home. So did I, more than absolutely anything in the world. But the house sold in just 2 weeks for $420,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage, we cleared $305,000. Every single penny went directly to medical bills and treatment costs. We moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment downtown in a building with thin walls and questionable neighbors. Sophia had to share a room with Tyler for the first time in her entire life. She never complained directly to me, always trying to be brave. But I could hear her crying through the thin walls late at night. My kids were suffering emotionally, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it except keep working, keep selling things, keep desperately trying to save their mother's life. My father, Jack, came to the apartment one evening unannounced and found me packing up more of my tools to sell. He's 73 years old, retired from the same construction business I'd eventually taken over from him, and he was absolutely furious when he saw what I was doing. He told me bluntly that this had gone far enough, and he wanted to help financially. He said he and my mother had $50,000 saved up that they could give me right away. I refused to take it. I told him they needed that money for their retirement for emergencies. He actually slammed his hand down hard on the table, something he hadn't done since I was a rebellious teenager, and told me to forget my stupid pride. He said I was drowning right in front of him and refusing to grab the life preserver he was desperately throwing to me. I still wouldn't budge or take the money. I told him my wife was my responsibility to care for. He said family is all of our responsibility. That's how this works. But I was way too stubborn to listen to him. I wish now more than anything I'd swallowed my pride and taken his help. It would have saved so much pain for everyone. The wedding ring was absolutely the hardest thing to sell. 3 carats, platinum band, bought when I landed my first really major construction contract and had some money. I'd promised Rebecca on our wedding day that she'd never have to take it off. Now I was sitting at Steinberg's pawn shop on the east side, sliding my ring across the counter to old Mr. Steinberg, who'd known my family for over 40 years. He picked it up and looked at it with genuine sadness in his eyes. He told me this particular ring had real history behind it. My grandfather had bought the original band from his father back in 1955, and I'd had it reset with new stones for Rebecca when we got married. He asked how much money I needed. I told him whatever he could fairly give me for it. He examined it carefully and said it was honestly worth maybe $8,000, but he'd give me $15,000. I tried to refuse the extra money, said I couldn't accept charity. He insisted firmly it wasn't charity at all. It was an investment in a good man having the worst year of his life. I took the $15,000, combined it with the $10,000 I got from secretly selling my father's vintage Harley-Davidson motorcycle without telling him, and that covered another month of Rebecca's treatment protocol. Meanwhile, Rebecca was supposedly getting better according to all the medical reports. She'd lost significant weight, which made her cheekbones look sharp and angular, but her skin color was returning to normal. Dr. Wong showed us comparison scans where the tumors had dramatically shrunk. He told us the experimental treatment was working far better than he'd initially expected, and he genuinely believed we were looking at full remission within just 2 more months. Rebecca cried with relief and gratitude. I felt absolutely nothing but bone-deep exhaustion. We'd supposedly won this battle, but I had literally nothing left. My brother Kevin pulled me aside at one of our Sunday family dinners and said something felt distinctly off about Rebecca's behavior. I asked what he meant specifically. He said she seemed fundamentally different as a person, that the way she looked at me lately was strange, like she was either disappointed or disgusted by me. I told him she'd been through absolute hell and was still recovering mentally and emotionally. He wasn't convinced at all, but dropped the subject. The week Dr. Wong officially declared Rebecca cancer-free and in full remission, She started getting frequent text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. When I asked who she was talking to so much, she claimed it was her cancer support group, other women who'd been through similar experiences. She said they understood what she'd been through in ways I simply couldn't. I should have known right then that something was seriously wrong. The woman who'd shared absolutely everything with me for over 20 years suddenly had secrets and a whole separate life I knew nothing about. 6 weeks after her final clear scan, I came home exhausted from a day labor job to find suitcases on our bed. Rebecca was packing her clothes with this cold, methodical precision. The apartment smelled strongly like her expensive perfume, the one she'd completely stopped wearing during her treatment, but had suddenly started using heavily again in recent weeks. I asked what was happening, if we were going somewhere, maybe taking a trip to celebrate her recovery. She didn't even bother looking up at me. She told me flatly and coldly that she was leaving me. The words didn't register in my brain at first. I just spent 14 brutal months systematically destroying my entire life to save hers. We'd won. She was cancer-free. We were supposed to rebuild our lives together now. I asked if this was about the money. Told her I would build everything back. Just give me some time and support. That's when she finally looked directly at me, and her eyes were absolutely ice cold, like looking at a stranger. She told me to look at myself, really look. She said I was pathetic, working random day labor jobs like an undocumented immigrant, living in this dump of an apartment, wearing the same 3 shirts on rotation because I'd sold everything else I owned. I reminded her I sold everything specifically to save her life. She laughed, this cruel, harsh sound I'd never heard come from her before. She said that was exactly the problem with me. A real man wouldn't have lost absolutely everything. A real man would have somehow found a way to keep his business, his house, his dignity intact. She said her lawyer, Brian Caldwell, was a real man who knew how to handle life properly. He saw her potential, saw what she could become without me dragging her down and holding her back. Brian Caldwell. I knew that name immediately. He was the aggressive divorce attorney with billboards all over the highway, the ones with slogans like, "Don't get mad, get everything, and take him for all he's worth." I asked directly if she was having an affair with her own divorce attorney. She said it wasn't an affair when the marriage was already dead anyway. She said the marriage died the day I sold our family house, maybe even before that. She told me she'd watched me scramble desperately and beg for money, saw me groveling at that pawn shop, watched me fire my loyal crew like a coward. She said watching me do all of that was absolutely disgusting to her. The divorce papers were already completely prepared and ready. She handed them to me like they were a simple grocery list. She was seeking full custody of Tyler and Sophia, substantial spousal support payments, and 30% of any future earnings if I ever managed to rebuild my business. I told her she couldn't take my kids away from me. She said she absolutely could and would do exactly that. She said they needed real stability, not a father living in cheap motels and working under the table for cash. I called Kevin within 5 minutes of her leaving. He drove over immediately, read through all the divorce papers, and his face turned bright red with anger. He said the whole thing was completely insane, that she couldn't possibly do this to me, that I'd literally saved her life. I told him apparently saving her life just made me weak and pathetic in her eyes. Legal aid assigned me a public defender named Patricia Ellis, fresh out of law school and completely overwhelmed with too many cases. She reviewed my entire financial situation with zero enthusiasm whatsoever. She told me bluntly that I had no assets, no steady income, and was currently living in a space that wouldn't meet minimum custody requirements for 2 teenagers. Meanwhile, Rebecca had already moved into a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with Brian Caldwell, who was both her divorce attorney and her new fiancé, according to the paperwork. Patricia said, honestly, it didn't look good for my case at all. The custody hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I wore my only suit, the one I kept in the back of my closet for funerals and important occasions. Rebecca showed up in expensive designer clothes I'd never seen before, with Brian Caldwell at her side looking smugly confident. Judge Morrison presided over the hearing, a woman known for being fair but extremely strict about children's welfare above all else. Rebecca testified first, and she absolutely destroyed my character. She painted me as unstable, financially irresponsible, and possibly suffering from depression. She claimed I sold our family home without properly consulting her first, making reckless financial decisions that left our children without any stability. She said she was genuinely concerned about my mental state and ability to parent. Her tears at key moments were perfectly timed for maximum effect. When my turn came to testify, I tried desperately to explain the context. I told Judge Morrison that I sold everything I owned to pay for Rebecca's cancer treatment. The medical bills exceeded $300,000 total. Brian Caldwell interrupted me aggressively and asked where the actual medical records were to prove this. He stated that his client's health information was private, but he could assure the court she would have survived just fine with standard treatment. He claimed I chose to pursue excessive and unnecessary measures that bankrupted our entire family. Then came the absolute worst part of the hearing. Tyler and Sophia had to testify about where they wanted to live. They wouldn't look anywhere near me. When Judge Morrison asked them directly where they preferred to live, Tyler's voice was completely flat and obviously rehearsed. He said their mom's house was better for them, that I could visit, but they needed stability right now. Sophia just nodded silently, tears streaming down her face the whole time. The ruling came remarkably fast. Given my current financial situation and living arrangements, Judge Morrison awarded full custody to Rebecca. I was granted supervised visitation every other weekend only. I also had to pay $500 monthly in child support, plus 30% of any future earnings over $40,000 annually for spousal support. I told the judge desperately that I didn't even have $500 to my name. She suggested I find employment very quickly or face contempt of court charges. Outside the courthouse afterwards, Rebecca walked right past me with my kids. Tyler tried to stop and talk to me, but she physically pulled him along. She said loudly enough for everyone around to hear not to make this harder than it already needed to be. Brian Caldwell stopped right next to me and said, I should have just let her go when I had the chance. He said some men just aren't meant to play in the big leagues. I told him I loved her. He actually laughed in my face and said, love is only for people who can afford it. That same night, I moved into the Starlight Motel, $40 per night paid weekly in advance. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had kind eyes and didn't ask any questions when I paid her in wrinkled cash. She gave me room 107 and said it was the quietest room, that I looked like I desperately needed some quiet. The room smelled like old cigarettes and complete defeat. One bed, one chair, a TV that got exactly 3 channels. I sat on that bed and called Kevin to tell him I'd lost absolutely everything. My kids, my wife, my entire life. He told me I still had my family, and as long as I was alive, I could fight back somehow. I asked him, fight back with what? I have literally nothing left to fight with. He said I had them, him and our parents and everyone who loved me. They weren't giving up on me, but sitting alone in that depressing motel room, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I'd completely given up on myself. 3 long weeks went by in a complete blur. I stopped answering my family's calls because I couldn't handle their concern. I stopped hoping things would ever improve. I just existed, working random day labor jobs for cash and eating canned food alone in that room. Then came that 2 a.m. knock that changed absolutely everything I thought I knew. William Hayes laid out documents and photographs across my bed that made my head spin. Bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, text messages between Rebecca and Dr. Wong carefully planning appointment times when I wouldn't be able to attend. Photographs of her with Brian Caldwell dated 2 full years ago, long before her supposed diagnosis. William explained calmly that Dr. Michael Wong was actually Rebecca's second cousin. He'd been actively helping her plan this elaborate con for over 2 years. The cancer was completely fake, never existed. The medical records were carefully falsified. The chemotherapy was actually just saline solution mixed with specific vitamins and medications designed to make her sick enough to seem authentic. She lost weight through strict dieting and prescription appetite suppressants. Every single aspect was meticulously planned, documented, and executed with Dr. Wong's medical expertise and Brian Caldwell's legal strategy. I told William I couldn't process this. I'd seen her suffer with my own eyes. The vomiting, the dramatic weight loss, the absolute terror in her eyes. He explained patiently it was all carefully orchestrated theater. Ipecac syrup induces realistic vomiting. Phentermine causes rapid weight loss. Anxiety medications create authentic panic symptoms. Dr. Wong prescribed all of these under the guise of managing treatment side effects. William showed me Rebecca's offshore bank statements in detail. Every single time I sold something, the money had been systematically redirected to her private accounts. The house sale netted her $305,000. The construction equipment got her another $150,000. My father's motorcycle, my wedding ring, absolutely everything went straight from the supposed medical payments into her personal accounts. Then William showed me transcripts of recorded conversations between Rebecca and Brian Caldwell from just 3 days before she asked for the divorce. Brian asked if I was getting suspicious yet. Rebecca responded that I was far too exhausted to think straight about anything. that the fool had sold his wedding ring and actually cried at the pawn shop, according to Mr. Steinberg. Brian laughed and told her to file the divorce papers Monday morning. He said by the time I figured anything out at all, they'd already be in Bermuda spending my money. I punched the motel wall hard and left a hole in the cheap drywall. My knuckles started bleeding, but I didn't even feel the pain. They'd laughed about it all. She watched me sell my grandfather's ring and cry, and she'd laughed about it with her boyfriend. William explained that my father had suspected something was seriously wrong when Rebecca refused to let him attend any treatments or appointments. She claimed it was too emotional for her, but my father knew better than that. He'd hired William 6 months ago and had been quietly gathering evidence this entire time. I asked why nobody told me anything sooner. William said they needed absolutely ironclad evidence that would stand up in federal court. Rebecca was very careful and very smart about covering her tracks. One wrong move and she would have disappeared with all the money and possibly taken the children somewhere I'd never find them. They had to wait until absolutely everything was documented and every crime proven beyond any doubt. William showed me a video on his phone. It was Dr. Wong sitting in an FBI interrogation room, confessing to medical fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. He explained on camera that Rebecca was his cousin, that she came to him 2 years ago with this entire plan already formed. She told him I was getting boring, that she deserved better than me. She wanted out of the marriage but needed serious money to start over properly. He'd initially refused, but she offered him 30% of whatever she collected. He had massive gambling debts and desperately needed money. Every scan he ever showed me was from other patients, digitally altered with Rebecca's personal information. Every single treatment was completely fake. The whole thing was an elaborate con from start to finish. William told me there was more good news. My father had been secretly meeting with Tyler and Sophia regularly. 2 weeks ago, Tyler found his mother shredding documents late at night and called my father highly suspicious. That's when my father showed them both some of the evidence he'd collected. They knew the complete truth now. They were at my parents' house right now waiting for me to come home. But what about the custody order? I asked, confused. William smiled and said that custody order was about to become completely irrelevant. In approximately 4 hours, at exactly 6 a.m., the FBI would simultaneously arrest Rebecca and Brian Caldwell. The charges included medical fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and custodial interference. Dr. Wong had already been arrested the previous day and was currently in federal custody. Then William handed me a property deed. My father had bought my house the exact same day I sold it, using a shell company to completely hide the purchase from Rebecca. The house had been maintained perfectly and waiting for me this whole time. My father had also kept all my business licenses current, maintained my contractor's insurance, and had been turning away potential clients for months, telling them I'd be back in business soon. William told me one final thing that broke me completely. Rick and my entire construction crew had been meeting at my father's house every single Sunday. They'd all been refusing permanent positions with other companies, working day labor jobs just like me, waiting patiently for me to return. My father had been helping them all financially whenever they needed it. I couldn't speak at all. William stood to leave and handed me car keys. He said my truck was in the parking lot outside, that my father had been maintaining it this whole time. He also handed me a business card. On the back, written in my father's distinctive handwriting, it said, "Son, a man isn't measured by what he loses, but by what he's willing to sacrifice for family. You sacrificed everything. Now let your family help you rebuild. No more pride. Just come home, Dad." After William left, I sat alone in the darkness, processing everything for about an hour. Then, I finally showered, put on my last clean shirt, and walked out to the parking lot. My truck was sitting there under the streetlight, same crack in the windshield from where Tyler had accidentally hit a baseball 2 years ago. I drove to my parents' house as the sun was just coming up. Tyler and Sophia ran to my truck before I could even park properly. Sophia sobbed against my chest, saying they were so sorry that Mom had threatened to send them to military school if they didn't cooperate. Tyler hugged me harder than he ever had in his life, told me he'd known something was wrong, that the way Mom laughed about selling our house wasn't right at all. He said Grandpa showed them the real truth and that she was genuinely evil. My father stood on the porch looking satisfied like a general who'd finally won a long war. I told him I didn't even know what to say. He said, "Don't say anything at all. Just come inside." Mom made breakfast and my crew was on their way over right now. My phone rang suddenly. Agent Sarah Coleman with the FBI told me Rebecca and Brian Caldwell were both in custody. I'd need to come downtown to give an official statement that afternoon. I asked if they were actually going to prison. She said with all the evidence they had, both were looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. All the money had been frozen and would be returned to me as restitution. That was 6 months ago. Now I'm standing in my rebuilt workshop, running my hands over the same workbench where I taught Tyler to use a hammer when he was little. Rebecca got 12 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Brian Caldwell got 15 years plus permanent disbarment. Dr. Wong lost his medical license forever and got 8 years. The court ordered full restitution. Most of the money was gone, but what they recovered went toward rebuilding my business. But honestly, the money doesn't matter anymore. What matters is this Saturday morning with Tyler and Sophia working beside me on a custom bookshelf for their grandmother. Tyler asks me how I can trust anyone after what Mom did. I tell him what my father taught me. Trust but verify. I explain that I trusted Rebecca completely, and that wasn't wrong. Love should include trust, but I ignored obvious warning signs because I desperately wanted to believe the best. Real love protects while it trusts, like what Grandpa showed by investigating quietly while still supporting me emotionally. Sophia asks if I hate their mother. I tell her absolutely not, because hate would mean she still has power over me. I feel sorry for her. She had a family that loved her unconditionally, and she threw it all away for money that's now frozen. She'll spend the next 12 years in a prison cell thinking about that choice every single day. Rick walks into the workshop carrying coffee and donuts. He was the very first one back when I reopened Foster Construction. The whole crew returned within a week. We're smaller now, but so much stronger. Mrs. Henderson came back apologizing with a new project, a guest house she specifically wants me to build. My father appears in the doorway, still checking my work after all these years. His vigilance and refusal to give up saved me when I couldn't save myself. We work in comfortable silence until Sophia asks about the private investigator's business card still sitting on my desk. I tell her William thinks I should help other people going through what I went through, that fake illness scams are apparently more common than anyone realizes. He wants me to consult on cases, share my story publicly. Maybe someday I will. Right now, I'm focused entirely on rebuilding. 2 weeks ago, a man called me whose wife claimed she had a rare blood disease and was aggressively pushing him to sell everything they owned. William had given him my number. I agreed to meet him and looked over all his documents. I found 3 clear inconsistencies in his first 5 documents. His wife is now under investigation, and he still has his house. The motel key from room 107 hangs on a hook in my workshop, not as a reminder of rock bottom, but as proof you can come back from anything if you have people who refuse to let you stay down. Every morning I see it when I grab my tools, and I remember the most important lesson. Real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about having people who won't let you stay there. Tyler recently wrote an essay for school about heroes. He wrote about his grandfather, the man who fought a silent war to save his son. About me, who gave everything for love, even when that love was a complete lie. But mostly about how the real hero is the person who sees you at your absolute lowest point and says, "Get up. We're not done yet." Yesterday, Sophia performed at her spring concert, the exact same one I'd promised to attend back when life was still normal and perfect. I sat in the front row with my parents, Kevin, and my entire crew filling out the rest of the row. While she played her violin solo, I thought about all the concerts Rebecca will miss from her prison cell over the next decade. That knock on my motel door didn't just reveal Rebecca's deception and betrayal. It revealed the truth about love, family, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us up when we can't stand on our own. I lost everything trying to save someone who was never actually sick. But in losing everything, I found what actually mattered. Not the house I built with my hands, but the home my father kept alive in his heart. Not the business I created, but the brotherhood that waited months for my return. Not the marriage I thought I had, but the family that never let me go. If you're reading this broken by someone you trusted completely, know that your story isn't over yet. There are people fighting for you that you might not even know about. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the foundation for building something better. I'm still here, still building, still trusting people. But now I verify everything too. And that knock on my door was life itself, refusing to let me give up. It was my father's love reminding me that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up when you're eating cold soup in a motel room and says, "It's time to come home, son," We've got work to do.